Getting your first wheelchair changed everything, didn't it?
Absolutely. It gave me my freedom back.
So that was the problem solved?
That's what I thought.
But it wasn't.
Not even close.
Because nobody tells you about the questions that come afterwards.
Can I get it into the car?
Can I lift it safely?
Can I use it all day?
Can we actually take it anywhere?
Questions we should have asked first.
Getting that first power chair changed my life completely. Before that, I was mostly stuck indoors. I could get out occasionally on a mobility scooter, but only really for a bit of fresh air and a look round the park. Once I got the chair, I could actually do things again. I could go shopping, I could meet friends, I could go down to the pub. For the first time in years, I felt independent again. And that's important because I don't want this video to sound like I'm criticising wheelchairs. I'm not. That chair gave me a huge part of my life back. The problem was that I thought getting the chair was the end of the journey. I thought the problem had been solved. What I didn't realise was that the chair would create a whole new set of questions that nobody had warned me about.
One of the things people often forget is that every mobility decision affects more than one person. When Dad got his first power chair, it changed his life completely. Suddenly he could get out, do things for himself, and have a level of independence he'd been missing for years. And that's brilliant. The problem is that the wheelchair doesn't just become part of the disabled person's life, it becomes part of everybody else's life too. Dad was looking at it from the user's point of view. Quite naturally, he was asking things like, "Can I sit in it comfortably all day?" And, "Can I get around independently?" The people helping him were asking completely different questions. Can we get it into the car? Can we lift it safely? Can we take it on holiday? What happens if it gets stuck somewhere? What happens if it breaks down? Those questions matter just as much as the user's questions. The trouble is that when somebody first becomes disabled, and the people around them suddenly find themselves caring for a disabled person, neither side fully understands the situation yet. Everybody is doing their best, but everybody is learning at the same time. And that's exactly where expensive mistakes can happen. Not because anybody is stupid, not because anybody is careless, simply because nobody has had enough experience yet to know which questions need asking.
One of the first things nobody warned me about was transport. That probably sounds obvious now, but at the time I was so focused on what the chair could do for me that I never stopped to think about what it would take to move the thing around. I was asking all the usual questions. Can I sit in it comfortably? Can I get around independently? Can I go shopping? Can I go down to the pub? What I wasn't asking was whether the chair fitted the rest of my life. Could it go in the car? Could somebody actually lift it into the car? Could they do that once a week, every week, for years? Those weren't questions I was thinking about. And to be fair, why would I? I was looking at the chair from the user's point of view. The problem is that somebody else has to live with those decisions as well. A chair can be absolutely perfect for the person sitting in it, and still be a complete nightmare for the person who has to load it, unload it, store it, and transport it. That's one of the reasons experience matters so much. The brochure tells you what the chair can do. Experience tells you what living with the chair is actually like. And those are not always the same thing.
One of the things I've learned over the years is that the words wheelchair accessible don't actually tell you very much. I've lost count of the number of places that have told us they have a disabled toilet. And technically they're right. The door is wide enough and the floor is flat. What they don't tell you is whether Dad can actually use it once he's inside. Can he turn the chair round? Can he close the door behind him? Is there enough room to transfer safely? Or has half the space been filled with mops, buckets, and wet floor signs? Those are the questions that matter in real life, and they're exactly the sort of questions that people don't know to ask until they've already been caught out by them.
The same thing applies when you're booking accommodation. A lot of people think that if a hotel, guest house, or bed and breakfast says it's wheelchair accessible, that's the end of the conversation. In reality, that's usually where the questions start. Can the chair get through the bedroom door? Can it get into the bathroom? Can it turn around once it's inside? Can the wheelchair user actually get close enough to the bed, the toilet, or the shower to use them properly? Those are the things that matter. These days, if we're going somewhere new, I'd much rather see photographs than read a description. A photograph tells me far more than a website ever will. Because after a while, you start spotting potential problems immediately. You start looking at doorways. You start looking at turning space. You start looking at room layouts. And that's experience talking. The trouble is that when you're new to all this, you don't have that experience yet. Which means you often don't know what questions need asking until after you've arrived and discovered the problem for yourself.
One thing I've noticed over the years is that I look at places differently as well. Dad is usually looking at whether he can get through the door, whether there's enough room to turn the chair around, and whether he can actually use the facilities once he's inside. I'm often looking at completely different things. What happens if something goes wrong? What happens if the lift breaks down? What happens if we get stuck somewhere? And one thing I always notice is the fire exits. You'd be surprised how many places are perfectly accessible when everything is working normally. But if there's an emergency, suddenly the route out involves steps, narrow corridors, or doors that a wheelchair simply can't get through. Most people never have to think about things like that. But once you've spent enough time helping somebody who relies on a wheelchair, you start automatically looking for potential problems before they happen. Again, that's not something anybody teaches you. It's something experience teaches you over time.
So how do you avoid making those mistakes? The honest answer is that you probably won't avoid all of them. We certainly didn't. Most of what we've learned so far has come from getting things wrong. But there are ways to make life a lot easier. The biggest one is not to start with the wheelchair. Start with the problem. Work out what you actually need the wheelchair to do. Where are you going to use it? How are you going to transport it? Who is going to help you? How long are you likely to be sitting in it each day? What sort of places do you regularly visit? Once you've answered those questions, you can start looking at wheelchairs, because then you're choosing a chair to solve a problem. You're not choosing a chair and then hoping your life adapts to it afterwards.
One thing I'd strongly recommend is talking to people who are already living with the situation you're about to enter. Talk to wheelchair users, talk to carers, talk to people who've been doing it for years, because they'll often tell you things that never appear in brochures, websites, or product descriptions. They'll tell you what works, they'll tell you what doesn't, and they'll tell you about the mistakes they made, so that hopefully you don't have to make all of them yourself. I'd also suggest taking your time. When somebody's life has suddenly changed, there's a natural temptation to solve everything as quickly as possible. That's understandable. But a decision that takes an extra week to make is often better than a decision that takes years to undo. The more questions you ask at the beginning, the fewer surprises you're likely to find later. So if somebody watching this is just starting out, what's the one mistake you'd tell them not to make?
Choosing the wheelchair before they understand the problem.
So start with the situation,
Exactly.
and then find the equipment that fits it.
That's the way round to do it.